Ukraine on Monday dismissed Russia's promise to allow its citizens to travel safely on designated routes to Russia or its close ally Belarus. One Ukrainian official called it propaganda and not driven by humanitarian concerns. Russia announced a ceasefire and said it was offering routes for safe passage out of the capital, Kyiv, the southern port city of Mariupol, and hard-hit areas of Kharkiv and Sumy in the northeast, but it set out clearly defined paths for anyone seeking to escape that Ukraine said were unacceptable and an effort to manipulate world leaders. The news came after another night of Russian bombardment, days of aborted efforts to evacuate besieged civilians, and nearly 2 weeks of an invasion that has brought death and destruction to areas across Ukraine but seen slow progress in the Russian military offensive. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned of a new wave of Russian attacks and criticized world leaders for not doing enough to protect his country. He has called for a no-fly zone to be established, a move that has been rejected by Kyiv's allies in the West over fears that it could send the conflict, already one of Europe's most intense since World War II, spiraling into a broader war between Moscow and NATO. The invasion, now in its 12th day, has been condemned across the world, led to crippling sanctions on Russia, and left Russian President Vladimir Putin increasingly isolated on the world stage. But the Russian leader has shown no sign of pulling back in the face of fierce resistance. He has cracked down on dissent at home while warning the West against interference as he escalated his attack on his democratic neighbor. Russia has fired more than 625 missiles during the conflict and committed nearly all of the troops that had been amassed around Ukraine, a senior U.S. defense official said. Representatives for the two countries sat down for a third round of talks in Belarus on Monday afternoon local time, but with little hope of ending a war that has fueled a growing humanitarian crisis as millions of Ukrainians attempt to flee Russia's intensifying assault from the ground and air. Russia's Ministry of Defense unilaterally announced a ceasefire in the opening of humanitarian corridors in a statement early Monday. It said that the move came at the request of French President Emmanuel Macron, but that its forces would observe the process with drones to prevent Ukraine from attempts to deceive Russia. Macron criticized the proposal as a case of cynicism. "I don't know many Ukrainians who want to seek refuge in Russia. That's hypocrisy," he said in an interview on French news broadcaster LCI. 3 of the 6 proposed routes led to either Russia or Belarus, from where Russian forces have launched parts of their campaign, rejecting the offer to have civilians escape straight into the territory of countries behind the assault on their homes. Ukraine's Vice Prime Minister, Irina Vereshchuk, said that her country had sent a counter-proposal that would allow residents from Kyiv and Kharkiv to flee to western Ukraine. "Our people won't go to Belarus and to Russia," she told a news briefing in the heavily fortified capital, branding the proposal unacceptable, and saying that Russia was seeking to manipulate Macron's sincere desire to help. Zelensky advisor Mikhailo Podolyak dismissed the proposals as propaganda. "Let's call a spade," Podolyak told NBC News, accusing Russian forces of killing civilians on Ukrainian streets as they tried to leave the besieged or captured cities. "Russia is organizing propaganda corridors, not humanitarian ones," he said. Attempts to evacuate civilians from the besieged city of Mariupol on Saturday and Sunday were halted after Ukraine said Russian forces violated temporary ceasefires with a barrage of shelling. The International Committee of the Red Cross estimated that 200,000 people had been preparing to leave the city and blamed both Ukrainian and Russian forces for failing to agree on the details of the safe passage. At one point on Sunday, ICRC workers halted an evacuation attempt when they realized the road indicated to them to use was Mind. Dominic Stillhart, Director of Operations for the ICRC, told the BBC more than 1.735 million people have fled Ukraine to neighboring countries since the conflict began. The United Nations Refugee Agency said on Monday, up from 1.53 million a day earlier. Those who have remained have sheltered in basements and metro stations or packed trains heading west to areas largely free of the fighting. The United Nations said Monday that it recorded 406 civilian deaths between Feb. 24 and Sunday, including the deaths of 27 children. In addition, the UN recorded that 801 civilians were wounded in that time period. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights said it believes the total number of people killed since the conflict started is considerably higher, though, especially in government-controlled territory. Cities that have come under heavy Russian assault, including encircled Mariupol, have sounded the alarm about an impending humanitarian catastrophe. Russian shelling destroyed critical infrastructure and left residents without water, heat or electricity. And with dwindling food supplies, there is no safe place in the city. There are no neighborhoods where rockets don't hit, Alexander Sosnovsky, who fled Mariupol last week, told NBC News. People go to basements and sit there, hungry and cold. Since his departure, he said he hasn't been able to reach his mother and other relatives who remained in the city. I have no idea if they are alive or not, said Sosnovsky. 39. Irpin, just outside Kyiv, has come under heavy fire as Russian forces seek new momentum in their advance on the capital. Around 2,000 people safely left the town on Monday, according to the police, and streamed east toward the capital, with Russian forces blocking other routes of escape, helped by family members and the military. Those leaving included the most vulnerable in wheelchairs and on crutches in one particularly deadly incident in Irpin on Sunday. 2 children and 2 adults were killed by a Russian strike as they were seeking to flee. According to the city's mayor, NBC News has not verified the numbers of people killed. Russia has consistently denied targeting civilians. Ukraine's leaders have struck a more emphatic tone in recent days amid what they view as Western inaction in the face of a Russian advance that has increasingly hit populated areas. Zelensky on Sunday warned in a video message posted on Telegram of a new Russian assault on his country's major cities and lashed out at the West for its silence. It is decided on our land whether any other European nation will become the next victim of same aggression, he said in a new video early Monday. The future of the continent depends on us, on our resistance. He called for a boycott of oil from Russia, one of the world leading exporters, and renewed his call for the West to implement a no-fly zone above Ukraine. Putin, however, has warned that any such move would be viewed as participation in the conflict and likened Western sanctions to a declaration of war. The United States and its allies have focused on supplying Kyiv with weapons and aid in addition to imposing those crippling economic sanctions on Moscow. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin over the weekend ordered 500 U.S. military personnel to deploy to Europe to augment existing forces already there. A senior U.S. defense official told NBC News. The deployment is temporary and the U.S. still has no plans to send troops into Ukraine. The official said. The personnel sent to Europe will be assigned to refueling, maintenance and logistics support. Washington said over the weekend it was considering the oil import ban, a move that would likely send shockwaves through world markets. Oil prices surged overnight before coming down slightly. While European markets opened lower on Monday, President Joe Biden spoke with the leaders of France, Germany and the UK on Monday morning. They agreed to continue raising the costs on Russia for its unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, and affirmed plans for providing security, economic and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, the White House said. Moscow says it was provoked by the West to invade Ukraine and that it launched the conflict to disarm Kyiv and capture leaders it baselessly calls neo-Nazis. Putin's aim appeared to be replacing Zelensky's Western-leaning government with a regime that is friendlier to the Kremlin in a move to restore Russia's influence 3 decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Kremlin on Monday said it was ready to halt its offensive in a moment if Ukraine met a list of conditions. They include a change to its constitution to enshrine neutrality, acknowledging annexed Crimea as Russian territory and recognizing the separatist republics in Ukraine's east as independent territories. Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, according to Reuters, with little optimism for the latest round of negotiations set to take place in Belarus. Turkey said that Ukraine and Russia's foreign ministers agreed to meet on Thursday for talks in Antalya, Turkey. It would be the first meeting between the warring countries' 2 top diplomats since the conflict began. As his military campaign struggles against strong Ukrainian resistance, Putin has increasingly cracked down on dissent at home, with security services quashing any protests against the invasion and either blocking or driving out independent media. Russia's isolation grew in recent days, with TikTok and Netflix among the latest Western companies to say that they would halt operations in the country. The Big Four global accountancy firms, KPMG, PwC, EY and Deloitte, also said they will exit Russia over the weekend. Visa and MasterCard announced that they would suspend operations in Russia since Russia launched its offensive on Feb. 24. The progress of Putin's military has been slowed by strategic and logistical issues as well as determined Ukrainian defense on the ground. Russia has moved increasingly to striking cities and towns from the air, though its forces have made some progress in the country's south. Ukrainian military's commander-in-chief warned on Monday afternoon local time that Russian forces were redoubling their effort in the south, while also attempting to encircle Kyiv. In Mykolaiv, near Ukraine's southern Black Sea coast, Russian strikes on Monday targeted residential areas and industrial facilities. Ukraine's Interior Ministry said Ukrainian forces repulsed a Russian attack on the airport. The region's head said in a message on Telegram the U.S. has assessed that about 95% of the Russian forces that had amassed around Ukraine prior to the invasion are now inside the country. The official said a miles-long convoy outside of the capital has stalled in its progress. The official added, Russia is also likely targeting Ukrainian communications facilities in a bid to block the country's citizens from accessing news and information. Britain's Defence Ministry said in an intelligence update on Monday. It noted reports of Russia striking a TV tower in Kharkiv on Sunday, suspending broadcasting output, with the apparent incident following a similar strike on a TV tower in Kyiv last week. Meanwhile, after Russian forces took control of Europe's largest nuclear power plant, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency said in a tweet that he was working on an initiative to reach an agreement to ensure on safety and security to avoid a nuclear accident. The attack on the Zaporizhzhia plant in southeast Ukraine sparked a fire and fears of a nuclear meltdown. Like, share and subscribe here. We will learn more.